Welcome to the module on the Right to Education Act. The learning objectives of this module are that the learner will know and understand provisions under the RTE Act, and the learner will understand key issues, strategies and methodologies of using the RTE Act. Now, what is right to education? The right to education has been universally recognized since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. While the vast majority of countries have signed and ratified these rights, very few have integrated these into their national constitutions or provided the legislative and administrative framework to ensure that these rights are realized in practice. Today, the right to education is still denied to millions around the world. For education to be a meaningful right, it must be available, accessible, acceptable and adaptable. The concept of these four A's was developed by the former UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, Katerina Tomaszewski. Now, the RTE Act. The Right to Education Act guarantees free and compulsory education to children aged between 6 and 14 years in India under Article 21A of the Fundamental Right of the Indian Constitution. This Act is also known as the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act. The Act is applicable to all states of India except Jammu and Kashmir. Now, what are the main features of the RTE Act? The main features of this Act are free and compulsory education to all children in India irrespective of gender and social category. It makes education accessible to children coming from all sections of the society. It has opened the doors of private schools by making 25% of the seats reserved for the children belonging to the backward class and economically backward sections. Only unaided schools have been exempted from this criteria. It bans the screening procedure of children for giving admission. No child's admission can be rejected on the basis of unavailability of the required documents. The Act also bans corporal punishment. Now, what are the main provisions under the RTE Act? First is that the right of children to free and compulsory education till completion of elementary education in a neighborhood school. Second, it clarifies that compulsory education means obligation of the appropriate government to provide free elementary education and ensure compulsory admission, attendance and completion of elementary education to every child in the 6 to 14 age group. Free means that no child shall be liable to pay any kind of fee or charges or expenses which may prevent him or her from pursuing and completing elementary education. Thirdly, it makes provisions for a non-admitted child to be admitted to an age appropriate class. Fourthly, it specifies the duties and responsibilities of appropriate governments, local authority and parents in providing free and compulsory education and sharing of financial and other responsibilities between the central and state governments. Fifth, it lays down the norms and standards relating inter alia to pupil-teacher ratios, buildings and infrastructure, school working days, teacher working hours, etc. Sixth, it provides for rational deployment of teachers by ensuring that the specific pupil-teacher ratio is maintained for each school. Seventh, it provides for appointment of appropriately trained teachers, that is, teachers with the requisite entry and academic qualifications. Eighth, it prohibits physical punishment and mental harassment, screening procedures for admission of children, capitation fee, private tuition by teachers and running of schools without recognition. It provides for development of curriculum in consonance with the values enshrined in the Constitution, which would ensure the all-round development of the child, building on the child's knowledge, potential and talent and making the child free of fear, trauma and anxiety through a system of child-friendly and child-centered learning. Implementation and funding. Education in the Indian Constitution is a concurrent issue and both centre and states can legislate on the issue. The Act lays down specific responsibilities for the centre, state and local bodies for its implementation. The states lack the financial capacity to deliver education of an appropriate standard in all the schools needed for universal education. Thus, the central government will be required to subsidize the states. A committee set up to study the funds requirement and funding initially estimated that rupees 171,000 crores over 5 years was required to implement the Act. In April 2010, the central government agreed to the sharing of funding for implementing the law in the ratio of 65 to 35 between the centre and the states and a ratio of 90:10 for the northeastern states. However, in mid-2010, this figure was upgraded to rupees 231,000 crores and the centre agreed to raise its share to 68%. In 2011, a decision was taken to extend the right to education till class 10, age 16 and into the preschool age range. The CAB committee is in the process of looking into the implications of making these changes. Advisory Council on Implementation. The Ministry of Human Resources Development set up a high-level 14-member National Advisory Council for implementation of the Act. The advisor committee consists of 7 members from civil society organizations. Highlights in implementation of the RTE Act. The RTE Act requires surveys that will monitor all neighborhoods, identify children requiring education and set up facilities for providing it. The World Bank Education Specialist for India, Sam Carlson, has observed that the RTE Act is the first legislation in the world that puts the responsibility of ensuring enrollment, attendance and completion on the government. It is the parents' responsibility to send their children to school in the US and other countries. The right to education of persons with disabilities until 18 years of age is laid down under a separate legislation, the Persons with Disabilities Act. This Act has also given directions to the state government to improve the educational standard and make it more accessible to children. For that, the state has to develop the schools within 1 kilometer area from the children's residence for making school accessible to them. In order to improve educational standards, the state should conduct Teachers Eligibility Test (TET). Now, information on notice board regarding the admission procedure. The Act has also given directions to the schools for admitting the children under this Act. In relation to the admission process, the schools have to display the following information on their notice boards: total number of seats at the entry level in the school, total number of free seats available at entry level, the date of commencement of issue of application forms for the admission and the last date of its submission, the date of display of list of eligible candidates for draw, the date of draw of lots, date of display of the list of successful candidates, date of display of waiting list, last date of admission, date of opening of the school for the next academic year. Status of implementation. A report on the status of implementation of the Act was released by the Ministry of Human Resource Development on the first anniversary of the Act. The report admits that 8.1 million children in the age groups of 6 to 14 years remain out of school and there is a shortage of 508,000 teachers countrywide. The Supreme Court of India has also intervened to demand implementation of the Act in the Northeast. The Haryana government has assigned duties and responsibilities to the block elementary education officers cum block resource coordinators for effective implementation and continuous monitoring of implementation of the Right to Education Act in the state. Now, what are some of the criticisms that surround the RTE Act? The Act has been criticized for being hastily drafted, not consulting many groups active in education, not considering the quality of education, infringing on the rights of private and religious minority schools to administer their system, and for excluding children under 6 years of age. Many of the ideas are seen as continuing the policies of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan of the last decade. and the World Bank funded District Primary Education Program DPEP of the 90s, both of which while having set up a number of schools in rural areas were criticized for being ineffective and corruption ridden. Quality of education under RTE Act. The quality of education provided by the government system remains in question. While it remains the largest provider of elementary education in the country, having 80% of all recognized schools, it suffers from shortages of teachers, infrastructure gaps, and several localities continue to lack schools altogether. There are frequent allegations on these schools for being riddled with absenteeism and mismanagement, and appointments are based on political convenience. Despite the allure of free lunch in government schools, many parents send their children to private schools. Average school teacher salaries in private rural schools in some states are considerably lower than that in government schools. As a result, proponents of low-cost private schools critiqued government schools as being poor value for money. The system has been criticized as catering to the rural elites who are able to afford school fees in a country where large numbers of families live in absolute poverty. The Act has been criticized as discriminatory for not addressing these issues. Public-private partnership. In order to address these quality issues, the Act has provisions for compensating private schools for admission of children under the 25% quota, which has been compared to school vouchers, whereby parents may send their children in any school, private or public. This measure, along with the increase in PPP, has been viewed by some organizations such as the All India Forum for Right to Education as the state abdicating its constitutional obligation towards providing elementary education. Infringement on private schools. Private schools are not supporting and are declining the admissions under RTE Act. Many of them approach the Supreme Court on the validity of the Act. Barriers for orphans. The Act provides for admission of children without any certification. However, several states have continued pre-existing procedures insisting that children produce income and caste certificates, BPL cards and birth certificates. Orphan children are often unable to produce such documents even though they are willing to do so. As a result, schools are not admitting them as they require the documents as a condition for admission. Some fast facts to analyze the implementation of the Act. Out of school children. The number of out of school children has declined from 25 million in 2003 to 8.1 million in mid-2009. The most significant improvements have been in Bihar, Jharkhand, Manipur and Chhattisgarh. Social inclusion. Although there have been significant improvements in the proportion of children from socially disadvantaged groups in schools, persistent gaps remain. Girls are still less likely to enroll in school than boys. In 2005, for upper primary school, grades 6 to 8, girls' enrollment was still 8.8 points lower than boys. For scheduled tribes, the gender gap was 12.6 points and 16 points for scheduled castes. ST and SC children are less likely to access their right to 8 years of schooling. The dropout rate for ST children being 62.9% and 55.2% for SC children, compared to a national average of 48.8% leaving school before completing grade 8. Teachers. Children have the right to have at least one qualified and trained teacher for every 30 pupils. Currently, the national average is about one teacher to every 34 students, but in states such as Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh and West Bengal, one teacher works with more than 60 students. Sanitation. 84 out of 100 schools have drinking water facilities overall in India, but nearly half the schools in Arunachal Pradesh, Assam and Meghalaya do not. 65 out of 100 schools have common toilets in India. However, only 1 out of 4 schools in Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Chandigarh, Delhi, Jammu and Kashmir, Jharkhand, Odisha and Rajasthan have this facility. 54 out of 100 schools have separate toilet for girls. Key issues. The RTE Act is in force from 1st April 2010. Draft model rules have been shared with states which are required to formulate their state rules and have then modified as early as possible. RTE provides a right platform to reach the underreached with specific provisions for disadvantaged groups such as child labourers, migrant children, children with special needs, or those who have a disadvantage owing to social, cultural, economical, geographical, linguistic, gender, or such other factor. RTE focus on the quality of teaching and learning, which requires accelerated efforts and substantial reforms. Creative and sustained initiatives are crucial to train more than 1 million new and untrained teachers within the next 5 years and to reinforce the skills of existing teachers to ensure child-friendly education. Bringing 8 million out of school children into classes at the age appropriate level with the support to stay in school and succeed poses a major challenge. Substantial efforts are essential to eliminate disparities and ensure quality with equity. For example, investing in preschool is a key strategy. Families and communities also have a large role to play to ensure child-friendly education for each and every one of the estimated 190 million girls and boys in India who should be in elementary school today. School management committees made up of parents, local authorities, teachers and children themselves will need support to form school development plans and monitoring. The inclusion of 50% women and parents of children from disadvantaged groups in these committees should help overcome past disparities. Conclusion: the Right to Education Act guarantees the free and compulsory education to children aged between 6 and 14 years of India under Article 21A of the Indian Constitution, as Article 21A itself is a fundamental right. Previously, under Article 45, there was a provision of free and compulsory education for the children up to the age of 14. As Article 45 comes under directive principles of the state policy, it was not compulsion on the government to provide free and compulsory education to the children. This Act ensures all children, irrespective of gender and social category, have access to education and enables them to acquire skills, knowledge, values and attitudes necessary for becoming responsible and active citizens of India. Today, the right to education is still denied to millions, and to make this right available, accessible, acceptable and adaptable, proper support and mechanisms have to be developed by the government. Now, I will present a summary of this module. The Right to Education Act was passed on 26th August 2009 and came into force on 1st April 2010, which guarantees free and compulsory education to children irrespective of gender and social category aged between 6 and 14 years in India under Article 21A of the Indian Constitution. This Act is also known as the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act. The RTE Act aims at enabling the children to acquire the skills, knowledge, values and attitudes necessary to become responsible and active citizens of India. It makes provisions for a non-admitted child to be admitted to an age-appropriate class and has opened the doors of the private aided schools by making 25% of the seats available to children belonging to the backward class and economically backward sections. The Act banned screening as a procedure for admission, and no child's admission would be rejected on the basis of unavailability of the required documents, which basically makes this Act stronger. The Act also banned corporal punishment in schools. The Act lays down specific responsibilities for the centre, state and local bodies for its implementation. The centre has its share of 68%. A 14-member National Advisory Council was formed for the proper implementation of the Act. A number of other provisions regarding improvement of school infrastructure, teacher-student ratio and faculty are made in the Act. It is incumbent on the school to display information on the notice board regarding the admission procedure under the RTE Act. Quota, which has been compared to school vouchers, whereby parents may send their children in any school, private or public. Private aided schools are not supporting some provisions of the Act and are declining admissions under it. They have approached the Supreme Court on the validity of the Act. On September 2012, the Supreme Court subsequently declined a review petition of the Act. Thank you for being a part of the module on Right to Education Act.